Right, everyone else should come in as well. Thank you. Let's have some sustainable applause. Come and sit down. Thank you. Maybe this is an indication of the uncertainty still about sustainability, that we've got, what, 40 people in here at the moment, coming back from coffee as well. But that doesn't in any way weaken the importance of the issue. What I thought we would do, first of all, is actually ask each of the panelists to describe the work they do, because it won't be familiar to all of you. So, Shamina, why don't you tell us what you do in New York?
Hi, everybody. I'm Shamina Singh, and I started something called the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth, which is ostensibly the philanthropic hub of MasterCard, but we sit inside the company as an independent subsidiary with the remit to turn the assets of MasterCard's data, technology, capital, and people towards social impact. So it's a unique model of, a unique hybrid model of philanthropy and impact.
Tell us about the process which allowed you to persuade MasterCard to do that.
It was because the company decided very early on with Ajay Banga as the CEO to commit to bringing 500 million people into the formal economy. So a recognition that the business side of the house and the social impact outside of the house, when it comes to things like financial inclusion, digital access, are actually quite integrated and aligned. So it came from a place of actually the company's CEO and the board developing a company strategy that recognized the intersection between doing well by doing good.
Do you see that in other companies as well at the moment?
I see it in many companies, yes, but I think this the model of actually putting the board and the CEO and the assets of the firm behind a strategy that's completely integrated is relatively new.
Because that's important for the whole business of getting momentum on sustainability. Katerina.
I work in the European Commission, which by itself is the largest donor and provider of assistance together with the member states, by far outweighing any other official donor, in a sense. And the reason, or the bona fide for this panel, is that over the last 3 years, we have led the largest innovation in terms of finance and bringing the private sector, like Shamina was talking about, into development. And we can talk about it later under something called External Investment Plan, where we put on the table a de-risking instrument that will allow crowding in the private sector. And you asked me in the speaker's room to explain what NEAR means.
N-E-A-R, in the acronyms of the European Commission. We need to understand the lingo.
Yes, so the lingo is, I work in the part of the Commission that deals with the neighborhood policy and enlargement negotiations. And neighborhood, simply speaking, is the East. So Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, the Caucasus countries, and then Middle East, North Africa, MENA. And the enlargement countries are the 6 countries of the Western Balkans and Turkey.
Are you sensing a big change in public opinion which is pushing you in a more assertive way?
On the NEAR front, on the countries front, or the finance front? Certainly on the finance side, yes. I think there is, I'm not sure it's such a push factor, it's more of a pull factor by the private sector. I think that there is a lot of expectation that the gap, the huge gap that we already know we have in fulfilling the Sustainable Development Goals, can only be bridged by bringing the private and public sector together. And so I think that in that sense, it's more of a pull factor. But yes, there is push also from the public expectations.
Okay, Rosen, just before I come to you, I apologize if you're looking at my back, but I'm going to try and make this more intimate. So if you want to move and not see my back, I invite you to do that. But otherwise, I'm going to stand here to make it feel a little more intimate. Rosen, what are you doing now? No longer president of Bulgaria.
I'm a president, and you know, president is a lifetime job. I was there not for power games, I was there to serve. And actually I discovered that in politics, also in business, it's not so important how you enter, but it's very important how you exit. I exited politics in a very good way, so that I'm very beloved president in Bulgaria with a very strong voice. and internationally recognized. And of course, I came here as a very, very, very passionate defender, advocate, and a fighter for the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which I was so proud to put my signature and negotiate in them. And of course, the Paris Climate Change Agreement, where again I put my signature. I was very proud. We're talking today about disruption. I saw a lot of strong leaders who question today the world order, the world institutions of order, who are playing their power games. But when I was the acting president, I was looking not for strength, but for wisdom. And I think that as we saw a lot of disruption in questioning principles and institutions of order, those two amazing global consensuses we managed to achieve in a very, very difficult time. And this is the SDGs and the Paris Climate Change Agreement are worth fighting for, supporting, and I came here also to call for action on them because it is really a very sustainable and efficient way of how we should address the issue of the next generation and the planet we want to give it.
To put it bluntly, I mean, you're no longer personally representing a nation state, yet you have your voice, as you called it a moment ago. How much is that voice heard and listened to, particularly because you were one of the signatories? Does that add enormous impact?
Yeah, actually, I discovered also something else. When I was the acting president, you know, you're on the top. You're on Mount Everest. Very strong winds, a lot of fights, a lot of enemies. Everybody is trying to, in a way, question what you say, a lot of negative energy around. And when I'm now not the acting president, but the active citizen of Bulgaria, proven with a very strong record of serving, trying to unite, addressing problems as a very important part of the solving problems issue, I discovered today that in some areas of social life, economy, even politics, I'm even more beloved when I was the acting president.
Are you more influential than you were as a president?
Definitely yes.
That's worth remembering.
Definitely yes, because if you look especially at the new generation of politicians, again, playing power games, pretending to be very strong, being populistic and just addressing today or tomorrow issues, but not bringing sustainable solutions to any of the problems we face, I am a very strong voice of the opposite.
All right, I think we need to refocus this session actually on that particular point
Okay.
about who really has power. All right, well look, from Beijing, Renwei Huang, tell us what you do.
Good afternoon. I'm a professor, not from Beijing, from Shanghai, Fudan University. I'm in charge of Institute of Belt and Road Initiative and Global Governance. So I'm working on Belt and Road Initiative. Also, the sustainable development.
When you say work on the Belt and Road Initiative, what does that mean? Within a political framework set by the Politburo and Central Committee?
It's more academic research than political policy research, because Belt and Road is a new development program, not only in China, but worldwide. So we should learn from other countries how they accept or how they support it and how they feel difficult to accept it. So there are a lot of elements impact on this program. So we are working on different subjects: economic, international law, sociology, environmental protection, disease prevention, such things.
So are you sort of the research department for the Belt and Road Initiative?
Yeah, it is a research institute.
So, but you are, if you like, the research for the political leaders on how Belt and Road is going to work?
Yeah.
Are you getting it right all the time?
We propose different cases or different projects and also some policy public opinions from different countries. Let the leaders know what we are going on or what we are facing challenges.
Do the political leaders always agree with you?
Not always, but they listen to us.
They take note of what you say.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. Right. I want to just do this to create the ground understanding. And the next question for each of the four is, what is the state and what is the definition now of sustainability? We saw this, the SDGs put up there in the video, but how much the framing is changing and how fast it's changing. Shamina.
I think it's okay. The essential construct of sustainability, the need for sustainability, inclusive growth, social impact, that has not changed, and the people and people are demanding it. To my colleague's earlier point, the difference is.
Could I just check? Are they demanding it even more than ever now? Is that what?
Yeah, I think so, because
Okay.
and here's why. Or I think the demand has always been there. What's changed is our ability to deliver, but two, our ability to hear more because of the digital evolution or revolution, as whatever you want to call it. With the advent of technology and the ability to do things at scale and at pace, it's changed our ability enormously to both do good things and potentially do bad things. And so understanding that the pace and the scale and the tools with which we can execute are completely different than what they were even 2 or 3 years ago. And that's why the role of our organization, for example, is brand new. We started in late 2013, early 2014, because it was a response to the fact that we have to create new ways of doing this work in an era of technology, digitization, AI, machine learning, and those things. And so new institutions, if not new ways of doing this, are going to be coming up.
Are you always having internally to sort of redefine and refashion and reframe what you're looking at and how you're looking at it?
No, because the focus is on alleviating poverty. The focus is on climate change. The focus is on inclusive economic growth, financial inclusion. Those issues have been there from before, and they're there now. The difference is the advent of digitization and technology and our ability to address those issues to ensure, at least at the Center for Inclusive Growth, that the benefits of these changing and growing economies extend to everyone.
Katerina, the definition.
Yes. Before
The
that, I
framing.
just want to say
Sure.
you wanted to refocus the discussion around Rosen's point, and I think Shamina is making a very similar one from the tools perspective. That not only a former president, but we have a lot of leaders, new leaders from people that they were enabled by the digitalization.
Yes.
Whether it's the bloggers, whether it's the young lady in Sweden that starts
Greta.
a movement for sustainability and climate protection among the adolescents. So I think this is really a new era that we live in. But for me, what is the biggest reframing, or not so much reframing that happened in 2015 with the adoption of the SDGs, and we have not caught onto it yet, is that the SDGs don't apply to the developing world. They apply to everybody. They apply to the European Union, the United States, Canada, New Zealand, the same way as they apply to Cameroon and Sudan and Mozambique. And this is the big difference, because before we had a frame of the Millennium Development Goals, and it was very much about charity, about official aid, about the others, right? It was about the South. And I don't think that we have caught on to this. And I think the sparsity of people in this room, I think, is a reflection of that we have not caught onto this. And we don't want to face the fact that whether it's climate, which is very much a global issue, or whether it's the gaping inequality in the Western world that has risen in the last 15 years and that has fueled all the far-right and extremist movements, is something that we need to address. We need to address it for ourselves, and we also need to address it as part of the obligations that we took as in 2015 when Rosen signed the documents, among other leaders.
But to be clear, are you reacting to the way public opinion is pushing you? Because you mentioned Greta Thunberg. And we've seen extraordinary changes in the last few weeks alone. Simply the number of protests, not just from her as a 16-year-old, but many on the streets now. Are you reacting, or are you seeing this coming and therefore being ahead of the curve?
Well, on our side, when it comes to the external investment plan, which I mentioned, the de-risking instrument that we put on the table, incidentally, with Carla, who was playing a pivotal role during the Slovak presidency of the European Council, we actually got it through the legislative process. I think we were ahead of the curve. We were very much seeing that, and I must say it's really an extraordinary innovation that we put on the table, 1.5 billion euro guarantee, and we pledged to mobilize 44 billion euros until 2020, and we are right now already well on the way to exceed that target.
But it's not just about money, is it? It's about political attitude.
It's about political attitude and fundamentally about bridging the gap between the private and public sector, because that's been the missing link. And we have, I think it was the World Bank that did the assessment that we need $5 to $7 trillion a year to reach the 2030 goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, and we are nowhere near getting that. But one thing we know for sure, that we cannot get there through official resources only. So unless we actually are able to effectively partner and crowd in the private sector that Shamina was describing from the other side, from the private sector side, we are going to fail.
Okay.
But let me just put some color to what she's talking about, because it's really important what they've done here. This fund, this innovation from the public sector side, will have enormous impact, because what it allows to happen is when, say for example, small businesses want to formalize their business, or they want to digitize, or they want to join a global economy. If they don't have a de-risking instrument, it's very difficult for banks to lend the money to small businesses to allow them to actually join the economy. So the fact that they've allowed a fund for banks to tap that allow de-risking, so allow banks to take on more risk, redefine risk in a finance way around social impact, it's enormously important.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to give you a thought here. I'd like you to help set the agenda for the discussion, not necessarily on Slido. I'm going to come to you, because rather than me asking questions, why don't you come in with specific questions when we've got to the end of the row this time? Rosen, your view of how, is there a redefinition, a reframing? Is it moving it at the necessary speed, particularly in response to the way the public is now looking at this?
The direction is right, the platform is there. But the right speed we don't see today, and I can give you a lot of examples. But let me tell you a very simple definition and very simple thing I totally believe is the most important to us. We just say we want to leave a better, cleaner, peaceful planet to our children. So if you want to do that, then you understand that behind every success, there is a very simple rule. Success of human life, but also success of company, or a success even of a government, or all the political leaders together. And that very simple rule is that behind every success, you need to have the right plan how to succeed, and the right approach sometimes, the right approach how to succeed. Now, sometimes you're very genius. You have an amazing idea, a wonderful plan, but if you don't have the right approach, the other's not going to trust you, it's not going to fly. On the other side, you could have amazing approach, people trust you, you follow, they follow, you lead, but if you don't have the right plan, the right direction, you're gonna fail again. So do we have the right plan and the right approach, how to succeed for a cleaner and better and peaceful planet? And I think that's all SDGs are all about, because it is a matter of a global consensus in a time of power games, everybody against anybody. Political leaders questioning, not building up international order. Everybody came together in a global, amazing consensus for the SDGs. Secondly, if you look at the SDGs, the 17 SDGs, every one of them makes just the perfect sense. From fighting poverty, to having good infrastructure, good education, to having peace and a cleaner planet. And this is 2030 plan for the planet, which was so passionate about that because I was the president in Bulgaria actually who introduced long-term planning, fighting for Bulgaria 2030, linking Bulgarian 2030 plan to the SDGs 2030, creating, because the president is there not to divide its nation and not to question the principles, but to unite. So I was trying to unite everybody in my country, from political to business elite, social groups, into the Bulgarian 2030 plan, which is synchronized with Europe 2030 and the SDGs 2030. Why is that important? Because you don't just have to have the right plan, which is inclusive, not just Bulgaria, not just the European Commission, but everyone in the right direction. Secondly, you need to bring results. And that's all about the SDGs, because every year we need to show where we are, what are the targets, and we have today a global call for action for anybody, because everyone, it's a company, it's a family, it's an individual, it's a leader, can and should contribute in our inclusive effort for a better planet, which is only possible to be achieved if you are together. And that's about sustainable solution for the problems we have. And the last point, just look at lessons not learned from history, having the right approach and the wrong approach. I was watching the American President Trump, who was campaigning by saying Trump is digging coal. And the President of the United States was going to coal mining areas in the United States saying, I'm going to support you. It's a great job. On the other side, Maggie Thatcher, a wonderful leader I liked very much. I was there at the funeral of a great leader. She faced the same issue like in the 80s in the United Kingdom, where there was a huge strikes by the coal mining workers. Maggie Thatcher did exactly the opposite. She went to the coal mining workers 30 years ago, and she told them, listen, digging coal has no future because it's polluting the planet for our children. Because of that, I'm here as a government to tell you the truth, to point at the problem as the only way to solve the problem, and to tell you that the government will help you re-educate, bring another possible instrument, so that the government and the private sector together go to a new dimension of cooperation in order to solve a problem. Now, you have Maggie Thatcher saying coal industry has no future and we need to go in an honest and inclusive way to help everyone. And on the other side, 30 years later, you see how the American president is just saying the opposite. He has a future. No, I don't think it's an honest and a fair approach to the children of all those coal mining workers, because I think they really have no future. But we need to help them. And here is the point. We need to be honest. We need to address the problems, not shift them to the next commission or the next generation or the next CEO of a company. We need to act now. There is a call for action. And if we act, then we're going to bring things forward. And just the last thing, as the American president was saying, coal mining industry is a great thing. The Germans came with a plan how to avoid, and they're now struggling. They're bringing municipalities, government, regions together. They failed. The Germans are going to fail their goals for 2020, but they work very hard. And I'm sure on a long term, they're moving in the right direction.
I should tell you that the last coal mines have closed in Britain, and we haven't
Great.
produced electricity from coal for at least 2 weeks. So, and
Bravo.
but some of it was being imported. So she was right,
Yeah.
even though it was socially unacceptable in those times. Who would like to come in? I'm going to go to the professor, but let me get to the microphones now, immediately. Okay, one microphone here, please, and one microphone there, one microphone here. I'm going to come to you in a moment because I want to go to the professor first and say, the Belt and Road Initiative, how much is sustainability really part of Belt and Road? Because there is this sense that China is in a mode of acquisition. We heard it from the NATO Supreme Allied Commander, the worries about China taking over things at using money rather than worrying about sustainability.
Firstly, I should give a basic introduction about our concept of development.
And sustainability, please.
Yeah, how we changed from very early 1980s. That time China was in a very low point of development. So we put economic growth as the core concept. Economic growth does not mean development. It's different concept. That time we didn't know the differences between growth and development. Just the volume bigger is the better. Then after we enter into WTO, we find the volume can be bigger, but the quality can be worse. So development should be more important than growth. But development does not mean comprehensive, balanced development. So we changed from economic development to social and economic development.
But you haven't used the word sustainability.
Yeah.
You can have development,
Yeah.
but you've got to have sustainability too.
Until 2010, the sustainability of development became the core concept of our development. So we changed from growth to development to sustainable development, 3 periods. And even later, we became more and more worldwide economic power based on the manufacture. So we joined the Paris Agreement and promised to do our responsibility until 2030. So this 2030 program became the top line of our policy to guide our development.
But I must press you again.
Yeah.
In your academic advice, which
Yes.
you give to the Politburo and the Central Committee about Belt and Road, are you telling them you're being sustainable or you're not being sustainable enough? Because if China
Yes.
is very bent on acquisition and is moving an enormous amount of concrete to build a lot of stuff, that is very unsustainable. In other words, are you telling your political leaders you've got to be more sustainable on Belt and Road?
No problem.
Is that a yes or no?
But I think yes. We understand the sustainability of the Belt and Road is extremely important. Why? Because one, we should know if the world economy is very imbalanced between extremely rich and extremely poor, it's not sustainable for world economy. This is the first. And the second, all the parts, different parts of world market, if they separated, not unified, then it's not sustainable.
So to be clear, your advice includes the word sustainability
Yes.
to the political leaders?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Right. Let's get some more questions. Let's get the first questions. They're probably better than mine. We've got 4 or 5 people, a lot of people. So let's keep the answers relatively brief. There is one anonymous question here. How do we meet the goals by 2030? We have 10 years and a bit left. Will you all introduce yourself, please? Let's try and see if it's switched on. It is switched on. Green, the green microphone, please.
Doesn't work.
Who's? No. Okay. I'm not going to avoid you. Let's see if the red microphone works. I don't want you to feel that we've usurped you. This doesn't have a color, but it might work.
I was going to continue pressing. My name is Cinziana Poena. I'm a Millennium Fellow with the Atlantic Council. Referring a little bit to what Ms. Singh was speaking about, this general demand for social impact and purpose-driven business, I would like to actually address a question to Mr. Ren Wei. What is the appetite of Chinese businesses, especially those involved in the Belt and Road Initiative, to rise up to the same environmental, social, and government standards that otherwise are expected, for example, from EU businesses?
Are you suspicious that actually, even though he says sustainability is part of the advice, that it doesn't really manifest itself?
No, I'm a sociologist and I drive myself by evidence, so I would like to know what the facts are.
All right. Is your question first to Shamima?
No.
No, it's
Okay.
to Mr.
Professor.
Thank you. This is a good question. The Belt and Road Initiative related countries or areas mostly are very fragile for their protection of environment. You see, if we open a project of railroad, then we will cut some way slow mountains or the rivers or the forests. Those are very important part of environment in those areas. So we should be very careful how these projects will be destructive of this environment in these regions. And we should talk with their local government and local people and try to recover this environment when the project completed. So if you go to East Africa, the Kenya and Ethiopia, you can see the railroad already completed, and the environment there is still kept quite well. And I think we should be very careful. This is one thing on the Belt and Road. And the other is the social. You are a sociologist. Sociology is also our one of the factors we should think of the sustainable development, because when the Belt and Road pass through different regions, different cultures, different religions, different ethnic groups, how to make harmony between the projects and these different cultures and the sociology conditions.
Well, let's just check that. Let's give a reality check, if I may, because I feel I've read a lot of stuff which does question some of what you're saying there. Katharina, you at the Commission a couple of months ago, you had a pretty tough report on China. What's your view?
I think the sustainability of the Belt and Road we need to see in a broader sense. And I think that there are some examples that are quite troubling. In fact, to give you one, in Montenegro, there is a big Chinese investment that brought up the deficit of the country by 20 percentage points, eating up the fiscal space for the next many, many years for one project. And that's something that happens in a number of countries. The countries that we cover and work in, whether it's the east of Europe or whether it's the Balkans, we are actually very concerned because we welcome Chinese investment, we welcome Chinese participation. We, of course, subscribe to the idea that the world should be better connected, but I think that the individual projects can actually have very harmful impact. Another example, not only the fiscal space. What happens is that a Chinese company wins a tender, and there are physically examples of people living on ships with China brings its workers and does not contribute to the construction economy locally. When we do investments, according to the environment, social and governance standards that we impose on our own companies, we actually support the local economy, the local development. So I actually think it's, I mean, with all due respect, I think that there are really quite a lot of examples where the combined impact on sustainability, not only environmental, but also fiscal and social and labor market, etc., is more questionable.
Professor, I'll let you respond in a moment. In Bulgaria, have you got any examples of this as well?
We do not have.
And also, Shumina, I'll come to you
We do not have really Chinese investments in infrastructure. I wish we would have more because we welcome Chinese investments, of course, when they are based on the European Union standards and European Union assessment of a good, let's say, trading practices. But Bulgaria is one of the strong advocates. Bulgaria is a friend. Bulgaria is proud we doubled the trade between Bulgaria and China for the last 10 years, but it's significantly small to the trade we have with Germany, with Austria, with some other countries.
Shamila,
So really, I cannot give an example of a Chinese investment in my country, unfortunately.
Shamila, is there anything you want to add about?
I would just say that the analogy between connection is an important one. So there's a reason why we're sort of sitting here as a payments company, because we have connected buyers and sellers who don't know each other, can't see each other across 210 markets. And so when you do that kind of connection and that kind of trust building around commerce, you develop a set of rules, engagements, protocols, policies that allow you to conduct business in a way that respects the local economy, that is global in nature, and provides a level of stability that I think we often miss when we're thinking about things that cross borders, cross ethnicities, cross genders, things like that. And the importance of being agnostic while being supportive to all of the things that you're trying to connect. And so, not to make it a very close analogy, but I think as we're listening to this, we are at a moment in time where technology is going to allow us to do things in a way that we've never been able to do them before. So instead of relying on the rules of the past and the policies of the past, and frankly, the way that governments and private sector don't work together as well as they should around advancing economies, we might want to look at all of these things in a different way and really understand how you bring more actors and more stakeholders into the conversation.
Thank you. Professor, what's your response? Because
Yeah.
essentially, I think the Commission is saying it's not sustainable.
I just want to say some facts. Maybe you are right, but I should point out that the total volume of our investment to the Belt and Road areas, more than 200 billion US dollar, more than. And the failed projects or the negative part of this volume, I believe only no more than 15%, and mostly successful. So if you pick one project, say this is Belt and Road, it's not true. And I gave you some successful projects as the cases. One is in Belarus, we set up the factory of automobile, and it is very successful. And in Hungary, between Hungary and Serbia, the railroad project is very welcomed in local people and their government, because the railroad between Serbia and Hungary is they are so poor based on the 1950s, only the per hour speed lower than 50 kilometer per hour. And now if the project completed, it at least 120 per kilometer per hour. And the port of Greece,
Piraeus.
yeah, you see, when China managed this port, the transportation, the volume of transportation in this port doubled and doubled. The position, the range of the port in the world moved from the 69 to 30 above, and it's still going up.
But could I put to you that the problem is that your definition of successful
Yes.
in terms of the political outreach from Beijing or Shanghai is actually rather different.
It's
to
not
the,
a political standard.
But
it's
but
the
it's different
standard
to
of
the definition of sustainability.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think if we may help these regions or these countries develop itself, it's the base of the sustainable development. And we don't want to say China can do everything for you. We just give them some conditions for themselves to develop.
I think that we have different understanding of sustainability, because and I very much agree that at the technical level the projects can be very successful. Yes, the motorway works, the railroad is faster, the port is deeper. The issue that I was addressing is that when you lend to the countries at wildly, disproportionately almost to the economies, large sums, and you offer existing politicians, long grace periods, they go for it. But it's exactly what Nick was mentioning before. What do we do about the next generations, right? So you actually, some of the countries that we work with, and we are in very close engagement and dialogue on public finance management and sustainability of that, etc., we suddenly realize that they are not able to borrow for things they desperately need, like rebuilding hospitals or schools, because they have used up that opportunity for many, many, many years up front for things that, okay, may improve the speed of railroad by something, by, an important margin, but is that the best investment that the country should have been doing? And so I think that too much of an offer can skew the choices that the politicians do, not always in the best way for our partner countries, and with questionable sustainability. If we look at sustainability in a broad sense.
Katerina, maybe I can put it in a less diplomatic way. There are many who feel that the Chinese investment actually traps countries into extraordinary payment deals which they simply can't honor, and therefore China then moves in and says, right, we'll take the property and write off the debt. And therefore
this is so-called trap of debt, is it? This is so-called
exactly that.
Trap of debt. I can explain to you.
But are you nodding agreement there, Katerina?
You have a much greater ability to say things.
Nick, probably.
Well, let me hear the professor, if I may, first.
Some people, even Financial Times, published some paper on this concept of trap of debt. Then I talked with Martin Wolf, say, how do you explain this trap of debt? That means all Chinese money goes to the country, then divided to their budget, and they will not pay for China next 50 years, so China can control this country. This is the so-called trap of debt. Then I say, for the case of Pakistan, maybe it is the largest country, largest one, except China's money. How much? About 20 billion US dollar from China to Pakistan. Is it big? It's huge.
But you get a deep water port at the end of it.
Let me say. So we divide them into several parts. One is official assistance, about 5%. The other is the official loan to the Pakistan, about 15%. Then put them together, 20%. And another 80% or investment from Chinese companies or enterprises. And investment does not mean debt. Investment should be returned by the market, by those companies themselves, not by the Pakistan government to pay to Chinese government. It's not debt, it's investment. And even the official loan can be divided into different parts. Very low interest rate or zero interest rate, and periodical payment, such different things. So only about 10% are real debt of Pakistan to China. Is it a trap of debt? It's very, very small part. And to Sri Lanka,
Pakistan has enormous debts anyway.
yeah. So the concept, what is debt? It should be very well defined, not put all the money as debt. China, very clear. Belt and Road is a market behavior. We should make some money back, but based on the capability of the local government. If it's too high, the government cannot payback, we won't do this.
Okay, we know where the lines are drawn, Rosen, quickly, because I want to get some other questions in, but quickly on this. But we know where the lines are drawn on this issue.
It is normal that China is, and we can give many, many, many examples, not just the one in Montenegro, is giving money on a very simple principle. Here is a project, we're going to give you a credit, we're going to point at the construction company which comes from China, is going to build a road, an infrastructure, whatever, and then the government, of course, has to issue a government guarantee that for 10, 20 years. We saw a number of such that's nothing wrong with that. I can point, for example, at Albania, where in Albania we have the American government doing the same. There was an American company called Bechtel coming to Albania, building a highway for 6.5 billion.
An enormous corporation.
An enormous, yes, on a cost, enormous project, but the Albanian deficit shoot up in an amazing way, and now the country has structural and financial imbalances too. So, and here is my point, again coming to the SDGs. It is up to every country, big or small, rich or poor, all of them, and every single one of them, to come to a planning 2030. What do I want to achieve by 2030? How I'm going to achieve the 17 SDGs by 2030? And it has to be a 2030 plan. And if Montenegro was about to have a 2030 plan, Albania was there about to have a or Mozambique or the others, this 2030 plan has to be inclusive, having European, Chinese, American, whatever instruments, projects, investments, in order to achieve certain goals that are clearly measurable.
Okay.
And the lack of long-term planning is a very convenient environment for some of the biggest mismanagement happening today.
All right, we're getting a very clear idea of where the lines are drawn, as I'm repeating myself. 3 or 4 people still want to come in. We've got 10 minutes to run. So let's keep our remarks short, please.
Thanks.
Who else has got a microphone? Go ahead.
James Oppenheisen Law Firm in the United States. I think Ms. Singh's comments, I'd like to hear those fleshed out a little bit more. One of the statements you made was directly about growth and sustainable growth in the developing world through loans and the freeing up of funds to be made available to small and medium-sized enterprises. In order for this to be sustainable, doesn't that then require some strengthening and I guess increased capacity for government institutions in those developing countries? Specifically, I mean, in Honduras and most of Central America, we have difficulty pointing to real collateral that's actually reliable. And what ability, while being agnostic, does a large corporation such as MasterCard have, or what willingness to go in and work with the government, not so much at the presidential and political level, but perhaps at the institution level, to create better functioning institutions.
Thank you. Okay, Shamima, quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. So here's, I'll give you a very quick example. We've sort of started a much more aggressive focus on private-private partnership in addition to public-private. So in Kenya, for example, what we've done with Unilever we've said, look, you've got at least 40,000 shop owners, small shop owners in your supply chain in Nairobi. You see their behavior because they're buying their supplies from Unilever. Every day, these shop owners are buying. So what we said to Unilever was, can we work with you to use that behavior as proxy for credit score? And then can we take that as proxy for credit score to bring in one of our partner banks, in this case Kenya Commercial Bank, to recognize that as behavior that's worthy of a small, regulated, low-interest loan that the shop owner can now get to buy more product, so that now they're stocking their shelves not for a day and what they can afford by using cash means in a day, but what they can stock for a week, a month, 2 months, and so on. What the knock-on effect of that is that the bank has now provided a formalized bank account where the bank can now see the transactions coming into the account in a way that they had no visibility before. So it's allowing this cycle of credit and trust and things like that to occur. And here's the really interesting thing. It's a private-private partnership. So we have briefed the government and we keep them apprised of what's going on, but it's not necessarily something that they have to alter laws, policies, regulations. The idea is because we have supported it with responsible growth, so there's a whole bunch that involves training and philanthropy and everything else, we've sort of covered the waterfront, at least we think we have, in terms of how we do this. That's just one example of looking at credit and looking at proxy for credit with the advent of technology and supply chain.
Does MasterCard make money out of this?
At this point, it's a very long tail economics thing for us. The idea, I mean, these loans really are $20 loans, $100 loans, and things like that. The hope is that as these companies become more digital, as customers start using more digital access, that ultimately all companies will benefit.
Well,
including
they have
MasterCard.
M-Pesa in Kenya, of course. M-Pesa, the M-Pesa, the mobile banking.
Correct.
Yeah, so they've already digitized a lot of their economy.
On the telephone
Yeah,
side,
yeah,
but not necessarily on the payment
All right,
side.
Katerina.
Just to give on this issue, just to give the public sector compliment, the new de-risking instruments we put on the table is not by itself. It's actually built on 3 pillars, this plan, and only one is financial. The other one is to, in fact, do the regulatory changes and the institutional changes that Shamina referred to, and work with the governments on expanding the financial sector beyond banking into collateral leasing, factoring, etc., and actually provide technical assistance to the governments to develop these changes. So I very much agree that the weaknesses in the institutional setup can be a problem for businesses. So I think that if you have on the one side private solutions like this and the work with the governments on changing the regulations to make the investment climate more favorable, including judiciary, etc., contract enforcement, that you can suddenly have movement in the right direction from both sides.
Can I just give one very quick example?
Quickly, please, because we're running out of time.
Okay, but the technology for good and the technology for bad. So in that same instance, where you have credit, so you brought up M-Pesa. So let me just talk about this for a second, because what's also happening at the same time is with the advent of mobile phone, it's making mobile phone companies give credit to customers very quickly without any education, without any line of sight of paying it back. You want to talk about debt. Think about the role, look at the roles now of credit blacklists in all of these markets. It's unfathomable what's happening now because of the advent of technology that's not being used responsibly to deliver credit. That's the bad side.
Thank you, Shamira. Right, let me get one. We're running out of time. Otherwise, you're going to not have any lunch.
Thank you.
We can have Impact lunch in here if you want.
It's not a word.
Not
But,
another microphone that doesn't work.
My name is Maria
Good.
Luisa Marinakis. I'm the ambassador of Greece here in Slovakia. I would like to follow up on the definition of sustainability in China. I would like to hear from Professor, when you speak to your co-citizens about sustainability development goals, what do you focus on first?
Thank you. I just want to say we change our concept of development for almost from very lower standard to higher standard about in 20 years. And the last 10 years, we suffered great damage of our environment protection deteriorate. Like in Beijing area, we had a very serious problem of frog.
Yeah, we know that, yeah.
Yeah. So why it happened? Because surrounding areas had very, very heavy steel industries. About several hundred million of tons annual production of steel. So now we cut the production of steel in this regional manufacture, and now it is getting down. The frog condition is better. improved in last 1 or 2 years, and the air in Beijing much more improved. So people now take care of their own health. They think it's more important than the economic development or simply the volume of the steel production.
And also salaries, wages, and therefore there are societal impacts.
So when they were very poor, they believe money is more important. Then when they grown up and became a little richer, they believe health is more important. So this is the change. And,
right.
And we are take our responsibility for 2030. So in 2030, we should move almost more than half of our coal-consuming or coal-consuming energy. So this is more important if we don't change this energy structure.
All right. I'm going to have to stop you there because I'm being told lunch
thank you.
must happen. But I want to give you each 15 seconds. The 2030 goals were well defined in the SDGs. When you look at the definitions there, have they survived the test of time, or would they have to be redrafted? In other words, are they robust and still relevant and still achievable? Quickly, if you can.
Yes.
Good. Excellent, excellent, Katrina.
They certainly survived. I'm not sure they are achievable.
Do they need to be redefined at all?
No, I think that the actors are being redefined, and I'm not certain that we will be able to reach it.
Because?
Because of the financing gap and because of the late incoming realization of some governments and international actors and push for it.
Rosen, what you signed, still relevant, still achievable, or should it be tweaked?
Absolutely there. Yes, I'm so proud of putting my signature, and there are so many inspiring examples. Just yesterday I saw something, really I was so happy to see it. If you fly through Vienna or you just get in the Austrian Airlines, get their magazine, and in their magazine you have a 10-page report of the SDGs, how thousands of Austrian companies came together, they started planning together, they announced what is their plan for 2030. We want to reduce poverty here, we want to do this there, we want to improve education here, and we plan together for 2030 this. Just look at any plane of Austrian Airlines. I was so impressed that those people are acting. And this call for action is for every one of us, because it depends on any one of us to address the pressing issues and bring solutions.
And you have a frequent flyer ticket, do you, for OS? And finally, Professor, are the SDGs still applicable, or would you want to be modifying the language and what the aims are, quickly?
We just do ourselves. If China can keep our promise until 2030, we believe it will be great to contribute to the world. So we just do ourselves.
Right, thank you. I think we've aired a significant number of issues, particularly on the challenges on the Belt and Road. So thank you very much indeed for listening to those challenges to you. Let me tell you, it's lunch. Can I thank the panelists? And thank you for your questions as well. It's lunchtime now, which is over in the hotel, and back here in an hour for the next session with a clutch of Balkan presidents. Thank you.